Good day, everyone. I'm Ajay Makan, a psychiatrist here in private practice in Johannesburg, South Africa. So let's continue on our journey of understanding what causes us depression, pain, hurt, the fact that we resort to substances, and how and hopefully there's more to life than just substances. I would like to start with a quote by Aldous Huxley from the book The Doors of Perception, which he wrote in 1954. He says that humanity at large will ever be able to dispense with artificial paradises seems very unlikely. Most men and women lead lives at the worst so painful, at the best so monotonous, poor and limited, that the urge to escape, the longing to transcend themselves, if only for a few moments, is and has always been one of the principal appetites of the soul. Very strong words in his book, The Doors of Perception. Also recognize that Aldous Huxley, according to the reports, wrote this book while he was experiencing the drug mescaline, a hallucinogenic drug. The book, The Doors of Perception, was actually taken by a line from a poem by William Blake. There's a well-known band called The Doors, and they in fact got the name as well, The Doors, for the name of the band from the book, The Doors of Perception. So this seems a strong case for substances, given that we go through so much pain, ordinariness, as he says, painfulness, be it trauma, and we all want to escape that. We don't start life as addicts or substance users or abusers. We start life very differently. We start with a clean slate. We may use sugar or salt or other such things to excess, be it food, be it clothing, be it shelter, but those are things not necessarily that we generally maybe get addicted to. However, over time, we find that we all end up in a rut, living through ordinariness, the mundaneness, the mediocrity of life. We end up on this hamster wheel where we seem to go around and around every day. Our lives become repetitive. Every single day becomes predictable. We can't tell one day from the next, let alone 1 year from the next. It seems to just go on and on and on. If sometimes many major cities have a freeway around the city, as we call it in this country, or a highway, and we can imagine ourselves going around and around on that freeway, on that highway at the highest speed possible, and sometimes we switch off. But then in the process, we get burnt out, stressed out. We've got our leg on the accelerator, and as much as we're trying to go as fast as possible, our clutch starts resting on that, our other leg starts resting on that clutch. And before we know it, even though we endeavor for the topmost speed, we are slowing down. The body and the mind eventually breaks down. And lo and behold, we resort to drugs, or if we don't, we end up being depressed, anxious, stressed out, burnt out. The drugs give us an amazing high. It shifts the neurochemicals and transmitters into a space we've never experienced before. In the beginning, it was brilliant. It caused us amazing pleasure. But as we know over time, the pleasure zone becomes more and more shorter. We need more and more of the drug to help us through the day. The trauma, the pain, the hurt, and the suffering overwhelms us, overburden us. And what happens is we endeavor on a daily basis to escape the pain, the hurt, the sorrow. And yes, all of us try. Yet what happens is the pain, the hurt, the sorrow that we undergo becomes part of our identity. It becomes part of our ego. It becomes our days of guts and glory. And what do I mean by that? All of us watching this video have a story thus far in our lives. And some of the stories are amazing, great stories. But we have to look at the nature of our story. It's great if that story has progressed, where we have found meaning and purpose. But if that story has a monster in it, a huge monster, if your story has turned into a nightmare, if there are dragons and demons you are fighting, that becomes fundamentally our story. When people ask you, who are you, and where you come from, or what do you do, that's the easy part. But then beyond that, they ask you more about yourself. What you and I do is describe our stories. Sometimes if you've been through substances, you'll describe the nights of maybe being intoxicated, of challenges, chaos with the family. If you're in states of depression, anger, hurt, and sorrow, you're describing the sources of it. That becomes your daily life, your daily story. What that story does, if it's negative, it gets the adrenaline going, it gets the cortisol going, it gets the neurotransmitters surging through your body, your mind. And that becomes fundamentally part of who we are. The tough part then is to give up that story. Why do we struggle to give up that story? Many of us have experienced pain, hurt, and suffering in our lives. We've become comfortable with the pain, hurt, and suffering. So the question then comes up, why must I give up pain, hurt, and suffering? Why must I give up the comfort and security that the pain, hurt, and suffering delivers to me? We refuse to give up the comfort and security of the story that we love. That's the story we bring into a room. That's the story that determines who I am, what makes me, and how I see myself as. We refuse to let go of that story. Sometimes, hopefully, fortunately, most of us use that story as a means to escape. We use it to push us forward. Because some of us, yes, get overwhelmed by that story, overburdened, and we become victims of the story. Let's explore that further. We become victims of that story. When people ask us why we are in that negative state, we'll describe that story. What we're doing, something very important. In order to be a victim, we have to blame. And when people describe themselves as a victim, they'll describe who or what they blame. And the people we blame in our lives generally can stem from immediate family, going beyond that, the community and society, the country we live in, or the world at large. And we make ourselves absolutely victims. The last decision of power we have made in order to be a victim is to blame. We make a mental shift in our lives to suggest that someone else is responsible and accountable for who we are. The tough part then, it is difficult to move beyond victim. Because what we've done, we've given power, value, and importance to someone else in our lives. We want our immediate family members to change. We want the society to change. We want the country to change. Maybe at a time we want the world to change. Yes, it's great that they hopefully will change, but there is no guarantees that we know. Because there's an expression over the years that I use that if you want others to change, you may have to wait a while. If they don't change in a while, you'll have to wait a long while. If they don't change in a long while, you'll have to wait a long, long while. And then you better believe in Hinduism or Buddhism, because you'll have to come back again and again and again until they change. And I'm not sure if it's worth it that we come back again and again in the hope that one person or one society or one country changes. So what then is the opposite of blame? In order not to be a victim, it means taking responsibility. How do we take responsibility? And what do we take responsibility for? Generally, if we've been in a negative situation, circumstance, or negative people in our lives, we will say, I will take responsibility for myself. And that's all good. We generally endeavor to, especially if we've been in a situation that's negative. We learn, wait a minute, I don't wish to trust anymore. I'm more taking responsibility for myself, and that we hope will be enough. However, as you know, as much as we take responsibility for ourselves, it sometimes is not enough. Something very interesting. We are all in the midst of this COVID pandemic at the moment. We may wear the face mask, practice social distancing, stay at home, isolate. where we all hear cases. I, as a doctor, hear people who say, I've never been out of the house, yet somehow or the other I contracted the virus. Okay, there's various ways one can contract it, and we all endeavor to. But somehow or the other, no matter how much responsibility we take for ourselves, everyone and anyone impacts on our lives. From one end of the world to the other, people impact and contribute to our lives, be it positively or negatively. And a principle or a fundamental statement that comes out of that is that as much as you have to take responsibility for yourselves, you have to take responsibility for everyone and anyone in this world. And usually, people say, how do I do that? How do I take responsibility for everyone else? It's a tough statement. Why? Because we assume responsibility is control. What is control? Generally, I have a young son, for example, a 7-year-old. The chance he's late for school, I'm rushing off to work. I then, in terms of responsibility, take control. I get him out of bed. Sometimes it means pulling him by the ankles a bit, nice and gently. Get him to the showers, get him ready for school, and control the whole situation. Sometimes when he was younger, physically lift him up, now he's a bit bigger, into the car and race off. So that would be control. He's 7. It's easy at this moment in time to control. When he's 27 and he's making me late for work, the chance he may be still living with me, you never know. Try and drag him off the bed, lift him up into the shower, into the car. It's going to be usually difficult. It's going to be tough to control a 27-year-old. All one can do, recognize that responsibility does not just equate to control. It is control plus awareness. We need to be aware, observe, witness the world around us. Recognize, as much as we can't physically and mentally control the world, we have to be physically, mentally, emotionally aware of the world. And then take the appropriate steps to control the circumstance, the situation, as much as it is within our power to do so. So recognize responsibility is not just control, it is awareness. In fact, what I will say is that control is just 1%. 99% is awareness. None of us can control what's going to happen tomorrow. None of us can predict what even the temperature is going to be like. None of us are all of us are absolutely clueless as to what's going to happen on the stock market come tomorrow. If we did, we'd all be wealth and beyond measure. It's awareness that is fundamental. Control is what you can physically and mentally do control. We do generally control things mentally by employing what we see as logic or rationality. Yet, beyond the logic and rationality, all of us face problems. And that is where awareness is in it. And it means developing a deeper sense of who we are and how we relate to the world. Others might call that intuition. It's fundamentally recognizing, how did I contribute to the situation? What do I need to do to shift the situation? It involves contemplation, reflection, and introspection. So yes, we can shift from being victims. So as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. How do you facilitate that change? Is to introspect, reflect, go deeper into who we are. So we fundamentally change from reacting to situations to responding to situations. And lo and behold, we in that way escape the monsters, the demons, the dragons that we all run away from. We all got things that are pushing us, because those instances, those circumstances endeavor to bring out the best in us at that time, because we then get into survival mode. We need to get out of this place. And then we become comfortable. We have escaped. We create the comfort zone around us. We have enough to eat. We avoid negative people. We safeguard ourselves. We live in this bubble where we feel safe. As much as we may be in a comfort zone, it can sometimes be the worst place to be. Because why? We generally create our comfort zone in comparison, I'll use the word, to the situation that we'll see as survival. So if we grew up in a state of poverty, we will want to escape that poverty and thereby create a comfort zone, a space where we don't feel impoverished, a place where we feel safe, secure, and comfortable. We thereby protect ourselves and we wish for no one to break that. The problem with that is it can stagnate us. We compare ourselves to a status quo of poverty and we say, hey, we don't want to be there anymore. We want to be in a better space and we've got there. And we can afford a few luxuries in life and we feel great. However, as much as we control that zone and we find it does not set us free. The world seeps through the doors and windows, and our minds get restless and agitated. That is not enough for who we are. We then become bored. We become ordinary. We kind of get the luxuries, the physical, material, but we recognize that does not fulfill us. We need more in life than that comfort zone. So I know what we're all running away from. But more important is where we are running to. Most of us, because we have reached a comfort zone and escaped a space of negativity, lose track of where we want to go to. We have nothing to drag us forward. We preserve ourselves in the endeavor to maintain the status quo. But by human nature, we need more. We need something more to endeavor towards. Because what happens is, as much as we escape the monsters, the dragons, the demons, they still exist. We live in their shadow. We're always comparing ourselves to that. We always, when we're faced with it, become reactive and endeavor to fight it. But we need to break free and transcend that zone. So purpose, a meaning, value in life, a truth that we see, gives us something to be pulled towards. It gives us somewhere to go to. It gives us progress in our lives. What we need to recognize that will set us free of the mind, that will allow us to go somewhere rather than always running away from. Something very interesting, be it in depression, anxiety, or substance use, many people, as much as they're in a good space, eventually relapse. They go back into a space of negativity. Why is that so? And then we define ourselves again and again and again by that substance, by depression, by anxiety. Because most of us have nowhere to go to. We need to step beyond the mind. What does that mean? The mind is a space of logic and rationality. We need to step forth in faith and conviction. What do we need to do? And this sounds bizarre. We need to be, in fact, illogical and irrational. As the saying goes, in order to do the impossible, you and I need to see the invisible. We need to chase that which is beyond the known. In fact, one might say, we are searching for the unknown. We are endeavoring to a space that will be uncomfortable, insecure, uncertain. We have to make life more than what it is. You and I need to engage and embrace life rather than the mindset. So, a way of describing it, and I want to use an example of a person by the name of Richard Albert. He was a well-known professor at Harvard, and he'd done tons of studies on a drug called LSD. And at some point on his journeys, he reached India. And he was up in the Himalayas, and one night he was driving with a friend of his, and they stopped in the mountains at the stars. And he even describes in videos of him where it looked like the painting from Van Gogh, the Starry, Starry Night. And He thought of his mom, who was ill in the United States, and he was concerned, they say, about her spleen, which was not well. He gets back in the car, and they journey forth. They were going to meet a guru called Maharaji, and he was with a friend, and this was the first time. He travels on, and the next day they get there, and he saw his friend prostrate at the feet of Maharaji, and he wonders, geez, I'm a Harvard professor, I'm not going to touch someone's feet. And the guru looks up at him and says, last night you were looking up at the stars. Okay. He says further, you were thinking of your mother, and you're concerned about her spleen. That took Richard Alpert. How does this man know? What was it? Remember, Richard Alpert had been a professor, had been researching LSD, a hallucinogenic drug, and he was curious about this drug and whether it could be experienced in a particular way, giving you the extraordinariness of life, taking you beyond the ordinary and the mundane, which the hallucinogen somewhat does, it seems. He then wonders about the drug, and the guru asks him, do you have any? And Richard had some in the car. And he says, I will take some. And he gives him quite a high dose. In fact, it was about 3 to 4 times the normal adult dose. And the guru drinks it. And Richard watches for a reaction, wondering what will happen. And the guru was absolutely fine, completely calm. There was no shift whatsoever. His guru had never taken LSD before. He had wondered, in fact he had asked, must I take it with water, without water, cold water, hot water? And he took 3 to 4 times the normal adult dose as the first dose. In fact, it seemed it had absolutely no impact on him. Richard Alpert is in wonder, curious, surprised at the reaction. The guru goes on further to say, when one takes something like this, the word of God matters more. What he is demonstrating is that there is more to life than the drug, more to life than the high that the substances gave. In fact, what he also demonstrates is that if there's depression, anger, anxiety, there's a far more better space to go to. What the guru did is demonstrate that the mind is more capable, much more capable, of achieving extraordinariness, breaking free of the mediocrity than you and I logically and rationally know. We have limited ourselves, we have confined ourselves to something less. Because it has become the average, because it's become the status quo, we need to recognize there is more. We need to contemplate, reflect, introspect beyond this world. At this time, we're all faced again with this COVID pandemic. It has forced us into our homes. It has forced us to isolate. It has forced us to be alone. It has made us prisoners, it seems. In fact, it reminds me of Mandela. 27 years in jail. One of the things he does say in his various writings, that the time in jail gave him time to reflect and think, to contemplate. The man that went into the cell, as we know, was known as an angry man. And for those of us who witnessed him leaving that cell, he was a different man. A man full of love. In fact, he says something very interesting along the lines of, if he had carried that bitterness, the anger, the hurt with him outside the cell, he would have still been a prisoner of those who put him into the cell. He had broken free. He refused, as much as he was a physical prisoner, he refused to be a mental and emotional prisoner. He demonstrates that he refused to blame. We have seen it in his life, through his experiences, that he took responsibility, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. In fact, for the entire world. To the point that when he left this planet, everyone wanted to be there. Everyone wanted to be at his funeral. What he demonstrates is that by controlling his mind, he controlled the situation. Even further than that, by controlling his mind, he controlled the world. What you and I need to do, is to change our stories. We can make our lives, our stories about depression, anger, anxiety, substances. Or we can choose to tap into a universal story, a story of purpose, truth, and meaning. We can look at what life gives us, or we can decide to look at what we can give to life. We can look at what I can get out of life, or we can decide to do what life gets out of us. Another way of putting it, we generally look at what I want out of life. More important, what does life want out of me?